Welcome to the Challenge Chronicles. I'm Devin Jordan. I'm with Trace Armstrong and Rob McIntyre. We're here to talk about the Challenge USA Episode 2. Brief housekeeping. We plan to do an email show sometime around Sunday. So if you would like to get your question in for the email show, you can message us at thechallengechronicles@gmail.com. You can message us on Patreon if you're a patron. You can also message on Discord. You can send it to us through Pigeon if you would like. Maybe that will get to one of us by Sunday. But
that is a Patreon exclusive show.
Correct. So if you would like to be able to listen to that and you sent your message in, you can go to patreon.com/thechallengechronicles and subscribe for $4 per month. Episode 2. I thought this was great. I think at one point in the show, I asked myself, why do we even have the main show at this point if we have this and All-Stars? I don't even think there's a reason for it because of how great All-Stars has been and how great this has been through the first 2 episodes. I've really enjoyed a lot of these characters, and I really hope this continues throughout the rest of this season. Do we know how many episodes this is supposed to be, what they have slated?
It's a good question. I heard 16,
but
that might have just been people spitballing.
There's no way it's 16 episodes. This thing ain't running past August. I would think there's 10.
You think that's it?
Yeah, I bet you that's right. Because
okay,
if we eliminate 8 more people, that will leave 4 men and 4 women left. We've already had 2 episodes. So maybe it's... That would be 10.
We don't know what the final's going to look like, and they could switch to individual eliminations, too.
So I bet you it could be around 12. 12 seems realistic, I bet.
12 would seem reasonable.
12's kind of a unique number for seasons. I feel like you don't really see that number for...
10 and 16 seem to be the 2 most common. 10 for an abridged season, 16 for a full. Or, like, it goes over that.
For a really long time, 13 used to be a common number for TV shows.
Which is strange.
It was 13.
That's because it used to be 13 and 22.
8 and 10 were common. Like, you never really saw seasons for shows be 9 episodes. 9 or 7. But...
For a while there, the challenge technically was because they would do 9 episodes and then they would do a reunion and they were your 10-episode order. So, yeah.
Good.
It's ebbed and flowed, and the advent of streaming has changed that yet again.
I don't even know where we want to start with this. What were your biggest takeaways from this episode?
So I guess a couple of things. For one, it seems like Survivor's by far the most cohesive group to this point. Maybe that's just because Tyson's been winning and he hasn't broken that trust, but they've been the one group that's not been getting people put in, really. From a production perspective, the 2 things I would point out that I wasn't a huge fan of, Mission was a bit repetitive. I mean, it was very long. It took a long time. I thought it was a very creative idea for a mission. It tested a lot of different skills. I just would have preferred if they found some way to get a couple more people going at one time. And I haven't liked one formatting to like production doesn't have like so far this season is how we'll we'll get to the elimination arena and then the winners will announce who's going in, and then we'll have a couple flashbacks of like conversations they had at that point. I get why they're doing that because, like, to show Tyson having the full extent of each of those conversations, it's very long and also repetitive. But at the same time, it just makes for a weird continuity in the show. I wish they would find a better way to work those things in.
The issue is that they gloss over the most important conversations of the episode, right? It's much more... I feel like it's much more exciting from a viewer's perspective to see Tyson have those conversations ahead of time. And then once we get to elimination, think to ourselves, oh, what's he actually going to do? We know he had this conversation with Tiffany. We know he had this conversation with Xavier. Will Xavier's pull actually be able to manifest itself in Tyson's decision? But instead, we see Xavier's conversation with Tyson after Tyson already made the decision, right?
Yeah.
I think that's the way they depicted it. So, I don't know. That's kind of... They did that on All-Stars.
It's like if you had like Jim and Pam get together in the office, and after they got together, you like flashback to, oh, here's them interacting throughout the entire series of this. You don't actually see like the build up. It's like you don't want to get slapped in the face without knowing why.
Yeah, they started to do it on All Stars this last season in All Stars 3. They've done it on Survivor, but I feel like they've done it on Survivor recently, but I feel like they've been way more effective with how they've
Well,
done
it's
it.
been both the first two episodes to this point, and I mean, that's the only thing we have to go off of. It seems like that may continue throughout the rest of the season.
Yeah, I think it really is more of a CBS Paramount type, hey, we would like you to edit it this way kind of deal. And I would even throw it in there. It really does feel like Survivor, but there's a big difference. You have to edit this differently than you do Survivor, because on Survivor, people vote, and then the person leaves, and that's the end of the episode. Whereas in the challenge, there is a decision to vote someone in, and then an elimination, and then a send-off. So, like, it isn't as effective as an editing tool for the challenge as it is for other reality shows, in my opinion.
Through 2 episodes, Tyson has looked absolutely incredible. Years ago, when we first talked about Tyson, we talked about people from Survivor that would be good on the challenge, and I said that I thought Tyson would be incredible. And through 2 episodes, I feel like, 1, that is true, and 2, I feel like he would be one of the best people on the main show from multiple perspectives.
He just has a distinct skill set compared to a lot of people on the main show. He'd be able to replicate kind of what Wes or Johnny do with not being Wes or Johnny. I feel like he has similar capabilities to them.
Politically and strategically, he's incredible. Physically,
he's light years ahead of everybody on this show in terms of that. Except for maybe James. He's probably the only other person that's in that league at the moment.
Well, I feel like
I don't know.
We haven't seen at that. We haven't
yeah.
status. Like, he's been the one who's been in power 2 weeks in a row, so it's been really...
Can you also tell me with a straight face that these Love Island people are going to be as good at politics as him, though?
I think a lot of...
They may be good at the social part of it.
I think a lot of the Big Brother people are capable, and a lot of the Survivor people are, like, elite as well.
Very capable.
Right?
I mean, Sarah outmaneuvered Tyson on Winners at War, so I don't think it's out of the question.
Sarah is about as good as it gets. Well, I think so. That was my other takeaway, is that Sarah, they've depicted her in a way that really makes me think like she could potentially be one of the women that wins. Because
I agree. That is without question. I think she's winning for the women.
It's been her and Angela they've really hyped up as the 2 big titans on the women's side so far.
I've loved both of them too. I think Angela's been great as well.
So that's a very polarizing.
Put Angela on the main show, please.
Really? Why? Why don't people like Angela?
Just on Big Brother, people found her boring.
Oh, I thought she's been pretty good. Don't you?
She's not been boring on this.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's only been 2 episodes so far, but yeah, I think she's been good.
Yeah. Now, I didn't really give my opening comment, so the only thing I'll have to add to that opening comment is just, I thought it was a good episode. What kept it from being a great episode was how friggin' long that daily was and how monotonously repetitive it was. Like, I was live... I don't think you call it tweeting. I was live chatting on Discord as it was going, and I was pulling my eyeballs out during the challenge because I was why the fuck
they just got to
are
find
they
a
doing
different
this?
move. You just got to find a different move and having that happen.
I thought
that's one thing I don't know if they know how to balance yet. Is that since the show is the challenge, and the one big difference between this show and Big Brother Survivor, the physical competition is supposed to be the focus. I don't know if they figured out how to weigh that properly in terms of time allotted to on the episode.
I honestly thought if you take away the mission, the episode was really crisp. I think that's one of the benefits.
I agree.
I agree completely.
And I think
that's that mission drug it down, not because of the mission, but just because how they edited it.
Because my thing is, like, after this episode happened, Alyssa, Shan, and Tiffany have all been going at each other constantly on social media. They all claim different things from misportrayed. So clearly there was stuff on the cutting room table that would have given us a bit more background on how the three of them, how the dynamic between the 3 of them was playing out at the time. Like, one other thing, like, for example, that was cut out. So Tiffany actually severely injured her ankle during the mission. That's why she claimed Cinco was carrying her to bed in addition to whatever else they had going on.
That actually makes sense then.
But she said,
I was like, she is performing very poorly in this elimination.
I mean, it's hard to say with the bike, but she apparently was very bad. I mean, so that was something that got cut out of the episode. And so there was a lot of those political things that I feel like it would have been nice to get a bit more weight to instead of just the mission.
But I feel like one of the reasons, beyond the fact that the characters seem to be providing them with good content, that this episode seemed so crisp, was the hour runtime. Right? I think this benefits
versus
them
the 90 minutes
immensely. I think it makes it so much easier.
Yeah, I still just think that there was enough that they could have sustained it a bit longer. I just again would prefer they just cut the mission down and then give us a bit more
Sure.
extra content.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if they had the typical montage that they have in that's common in missions where they get to a certain point after a certain number of competitors have performed
They didn't do
and
that.
they show what they do. They didn't just gloss over a bunch of people.
I feel like this season's
which
still.
they should have.
I think this season's still too new that they don't want to do that. Yeah, although that makes sense to do at the beginning of the season because that's when you have the most people.
There are a number of partners that we've gotten to this point after 2 cycles into the season with the random partners where after seeing how the partners interact with each other or seeing the partners on paper, I think to myself, that would be a fun partnership to have throughout the course of the season, right? A couple that come to mind, I think Justine and Tyson, even though competitively that's not the best partner for Tyson, I think that could be
I don't
fun
know
to
if
see
we
for
know
longer.
that. I thought she did a good job in this mission, and she played soccer in college. I don't know that we can say for sure she's not the best.
That's fair. I agree. That's fair. I think Shannon and Dominic has the potential to be a really fun pairing because of the personality.
I don't know if that one
would
would last very long.
Potentially not. I mean, she seemed. There were a number of women who, and men for that matter, who when they jumped onto the tires, literally just like hit the tires and
Did
like
not have good
bounced
form.
off.
Did not have good form. Yeah, the underrated skill in the challenge, knowing how to jump and grab onto things. That's a very critical capability to have.
What did you think? I would assume that both of you loved it. What did you think about Tyson's? And I think this is probably the most we've talked about a mission in a while, especially for how little we for how much we criticize it. But what did both of you think about Tyson's comment when he said that whenever he ran by the group, he tried to not act like he was breathing very heavily, just
Breathe
to
out of his nose,
just
so you-
demoralize them?
Brilliant. Brilliant.
Well, I mean, is it brilliant? It might work to demoralize them, but do you want to be seen as like this unstoppable titan? I think he's being playing a little bit too far in front right now.
I think this has to. So you have to remember that a lot of these people, or none of these people, have played the show before, right?
Yeah.
And so this could play out much like an older season of the show, where the stronger competitors stick with each other and they protect each other because they know that the other stronger competitors, if they win, keep each other further down the line. And that's what we saw historically, right? That's what we saw in the early pair seasons.
But my thing is though, is these people also come from like Survivor Big Brother. They come from recent seasons of those shows for the most part, and recent seasons of those shows have been either typically those shows to me boil down into 2 sort of categories. It's the big fish get together and then say, hey, we need to like keep each other around as protection because if we start chopping off the Titans, then I'm just going to be next. Or like sort of the smaller factions take hold and they're like, we just need these people out because we can't win if they're still around. So I think it'll be kind of a pull back and forth between that. But I definitely, if I was him, I don't know if because we've seen like the girls, for example, talk about already that, hey, Angela versus Sarah would be really good together in elimination for us. And like, there's going to come a time where he's going to get a random partner who sucks and then he's going to be vulnerable to elimination.
Yeah, but you could say
that
for anyone.
and I think that's what he's trying.
Well,
to
I
do.
know, but
He's
I think
trying
it seems that if it's the case for anybody, you don't want to appear so far out in front that when that opportunity does happen, it's a big deal.
But so I agree with you that playing out in front for him could potentially be an issue, and I thought the same thing when he made the comment about wanting to seem that much better than everyone. I agree. I thought about that, but I definitely think that there is a possibility that the stronger people stick together because this move, it seemed like, only helped him become closer with Big Brother, right? And his relationship with Xavier. And
they all wanted Tiffany out. Big Brother wanted her gone.
That's one of the things I wish we got more of a story on. Cause
we didn't see why they really wanted her gone. We heard it from Tyson.
Was it just that they wasn't her?
Say that again?
They basically
was just like Xavier.
The way that I took away from it.
Going home?
No, the way that I looked at it is just piecing together the conversations I saw on the show. it seemed as if everybody didn't trust Tiffany in the Big Brother Alliance because she would backstab people at a moment's notice, and she'll pretend to be your best friend and then stick the knife in. And I think they all were cognizant of the fact that if she's running the Alliance, they're all in potential trouble.
Well,
so it would be an easier predictive game for the Big Brother cast if they got rid of their one wild card, which was her.
But see, I don't buy that because I didn't watch every episode of that, but I followed it relatively closely. So she had a group of 6 that was formed pretty early on in the season, and they controlled basically everything without anybody knowing what was going on, and were able to make it to the end of the 6 of them. Like by the time anybody caught on, it was too late. I mean, and once they got to the end with the 6, then obviously like there were some emotions there, and there were a couple people who felt burned. She was the first one in the 6 actually to be eliminated because they thought she was the biggest threat at that point. But Big Brother is a very different game from the challenge. I don't know how you could look at Tiffany and say she's the biggest threat amongst that Big Brother group now, particularly with this.
I'm not saying she is. I'm saying that was their perception of her. And I also think one of the things some of these Big Brother people haven't figured out is something you just said. They're playing the challenge, not Big Brother, and this is a very different game. Like, a very different game. So it would have behooved them to keep her around, because you almost like want to play the survivor move there, and it's like, well, if it's perceived that she's the biggest threat, and it's perceived as if she's the most divisive, then it would behoove me to keep her around so that whenever I need a shield, I can throw her name out there.
Like, she was almost like the Suri figure on her season. That's kind of how I would put her at. She didn't make it quite as far as Suri did in Micronesia, but that's similar to how she was, like the character she had.
It's interesting because from an editing perspective this episode, we saw a lot of content from other members of the house and how they felt about Tiffany, but not really the Big Brother people. We saw at the beginning of the episode the Survivor people in a group talking about Tiffany and about her relationship with Cinco, right? We saw that.
Yeah.
Later in the episode, we saw the Love Island women talking together. We saw Kira and Cache and their conversation together, and Cache trying to put forward that what's her name? Am I saying it right?
Cache, yeah. It was Cache and
Okay.
Cashel.
You got it right.
What is Cashel is Cinco's ex, right? And then
And not to be confused with
No, that's
Cashel,
Cash.
the guy
No,
who got
Cache.
eliminated.
No, you're right. Cache is Cinco. Cashel was Justin Wilson.
So Cache talks with
Kira's
Kira,
ex.
and she talks about how one of them talks about how Tiffany is kind of gathering up the men in the house, right? And about how Tiffany is intimidated by other beautiful women, which I don't know. Like, that seemed like
That was such
really
a bizarre
out there,
accusation,
right?
right?
Just,
yeah, like
That was
we didn't
very
we didn't
weird.
see any support for that whatsoever.
What
And
does
so
that
I mean,
mean?
I don't really. It doesn't. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter if it's true or not. All that matters is if you can get people to use that as a narrative to tell themselves to go
Of
along
course,
with what
yeah.
you want, right? That's
Yeah,
what
when you're trying to
matters.
get somebody voted in, perception's all that matters. Just getting them to think.
And it seemed like it worked, right? It seemed like that discourse helped because the editors definitely tried to position Cache as one of the people that had influence over what happened in this episode, which I'm not really sure.
Do we ever
actually
see her and Tyson talk
make a
that much? I
difference.
guess they had one flashback of them talking, right? Or her and Justine, for that matter. I mean, that's one other thing, too, is that Justine is with the Love Island people. We got a lot more of Tyson's reasons for why Tiffany got voted in than Justine's, even though, I mean, looking at it just sort of naturally, it would seem like Justine maybe had more reason to vote her in than Tyson did.
We did, in the conversation between James and Kayla, the two people that were going directly into elimination, and Tyson and Justine, the people who would decide who would go in against them in elimination, we did see James bring up the idea of Cashel and Tiffany going in against them, and the subject matter of Cashel being from Love Island being an issue. Would that be an issue for her voting someone in from Love Island? She was pretty much like, no, that's fine. And I think it was probably because it was Cashel, right? We really didn't get much from him this season. We got a lot from Tiffany through her first 2 episodes, but I don't know. Yeah, it was interesting from an editing perspective. Like I said at the top, the most important conversations, and the ones that will probably be most important throughout the rest of the season, the conversation between Tyson and Big Brother, we didn't really get much of. So that would definitely be something that would have been nice to see more of.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see because I get with Tiffany gone, it seems like they're trying to portray Xavier as sort of the head of the Big Brother group now. And then he and Tyson seem to come to some sort of pact for the beginning. I don't know how much that's going to continue, especially depending upon who gets power. Like, do we think that's where the
I think
season
it really
goes? Do
revolves around Tyson.
we think that's where the season
Where
ends up? Is sort of a Big Brother versus Survivor political showdown, or
definitely, 100%,
that's where
Yeah.
eventually these
thousand
Love
percent.
Island.
The reason I say it revolves around Tyson is Tyson appears to be the on-camera person manipulating everything.
I just am curious what's going to
mainly
happen when
because
he's not
won
winning.
the first two.
Yeah, when he's not winning, I'm curious what happens there. So we just think these Love Island jabronis are all just,
We
not
thought
belong
that
to
They are
we thought
jabronis, that's
we
for
thought that
sure.
coming into the season.
Well, but
I
we've
mean,
gotten some
literally
we've
before
gotten some new information now.
literally before the season started, we talked about who would be going home early, and I was like, do you really think that between Big Brother, Survivor, and Love Island, that Love Island has a stronger possibility of sticking together than Big Brother and Survivor?
No.
There was just no way.
Well, they're half number X's.
Yeah, but they were still
Exactly, which makes it messier.
Yeah.
There was still I thought there was someone who said that look out for Love Island, or there was like something
They may have tried to
pre-season.
portray it on the show.
Yeah, I dismissed that
okay.
comment
well,
when
you
it
can
was
just look
made.
at
I
our
was like,
draft and see where the Love Island people went in comparison to Survivor and Big Brother people, and it's usually pretty far down the draft board.
yeah.
So I do
I think
I do think it
there's a certain. Go ahead.
I do think it will come down to Big Brother and Survivor. Big Brother already took one L through the first 2 weeks of the season. What are the That's what I was going to ask about. So currently, Big Brother has David Alexander, Derek, Enzo, Kyland, and Xavier. So they have, I mean, there's a lot of Big Brother people. So there's 5 Big Brother men. And for the women, there's Alyssa, Angela, Aza. That's it. So they are 8 strong for Big Brother. In Survivor, there is Tasha, who we have not seen mix with Survivor when we've seen the Survivor group speaking, which doesn't mean that she isn't talking with them. We just haven't seen that on camera, really. We have Tasha, Shan, Sarah, Desi for the women. So we have 4 Survivor women, and then for the men we have. Just keep going. Tyson, Dom, and Danny and Ben. So right now we're at 8-8. And I wonder if that was part of the reason why Big Brother was okay with losing Tiffany, because the numbers would still be at 8-8 in the alliances.
I think that's part of it. I think the other part of it is I think they felt, I don't know whether this is true, but just watching the Twitter drama and watching what we saw on screen, I really think Big Brother did not trust Tiffany. The rest of the Big Brother cast just did not really fully trust her to stay strong. They really felt like she would flip and do other things, and so I think that made it easier for them to do it. And then also still having 8-8 probably helped. If anything, I think that what this potential Survivor versus Big Brother thing is going to happen when they weed out Love Island, I think Amazing Race is going to have a pretty good ability to skate through for a while, because there's only 3 of them, and I don't think people really see James as a threat yet, and that will be interesting. And then Amazing Race also got lucky in that they were able to win their elimination, and they won't be paired together for potentially ever the rest of the game. So they will be able to spread their numbers out among the 2 alliances, and they can kind of play both sides, which is going to really help them as they move forward.
Strategically, he seems very good. I think you pointed that out coming into the season, that he would be someone to look out for. If he was slightly better physically, I think he would be a real threat. They were the only team to not get one word this week. I thought this was to go back to the mission a little bit, I really did think this was a fun mission. If they would have been able to think of a way to speed this up a little bit more, I think it would have been even better.
No, it was just editing. Like, if they had just edited this better, I felt like what it was, and this is what was bothering me in hindsight about it, it felt like they put it on as long as they did so that you could watch 12 minutes of people hitting the tires and falling in the water and TJ laughing. Like, that was what it felt like. It just felt like the point of it wasn't actually to gauge the competition, but instead to laugh at people falling in the water. And that's fine, but when you do it for 12 minutes straight, basically, it just gets to be really repetitive and old, you know? Like, that's one thing that I give producers credit for in the past. When they would have an issue like when Katie on Cutthroat did the cartwheel and just face planted into the water, instead of them cutting to all these other things and dwelling on it, they focused on that one and showed multiple replays of it because it was just such a crazy fall. When you show a crazy fall 12, 15 times in 12 minutes, it's just like, all right, I'm numb to this. Can you move on to other content? And if they had just sped up and edited this challenge better, I probably would have a more favorable opinion.
All right, quickly, let's do a power ranking of the top 5 falls in the history of the show.
Oh, it's hard to do off the top of my head.
Number one
is with the bullet.
Number one is obviously Siobhan,
no,
right?
Oh, you're right, dude. Oh, that's a tough one.
No, I would say Katie
no,
on
I think
Cutthroat
Siobhan and Julie have
Dude, are you kidding me?
the top 2. Siobhan is probably number 1. Julie on Inferno 2, though, with the
one,
bike, I mean...
Dude, so that's number 3
So the one with
yeah.
the one with Siobhan is so funny because the second time that she falls, you have one Danny screaming at her, right? You have to add in all of the dynamics because you have to include the situation that contributes to the fall. You have Danny screaming at her. You have the champions laughing their asses off at the side. And the second time that she falls, she swings across on the rope. I don't know if she makes it more than like 3 feet off of the platform before she starts letting go of the rope and like falling down the rope.
Yeah. That's why it was number 2 for me. That Katie Doyle one just made me.
The Julie one on Inferno 2 also does it for me with the bike, and then her just that to me has to be the top 2. Of course,
the
her
path
say
to
the path to
God
God is straight and narrow. The path to God is straight and narrow, and then just falls over.
And then here's my number 4, the surprising one. MJ on Duel 2, where he sounded like a donkey.
Oh, that one's
asthma
great.
as he fell.
What do you do with one
so
like Leroy on
It's so
Vendettas,
good.
where he legit almost looks like he died?
That's not
that one's
spectacular.
pretty
That's
terrifying.
frightening. Like, literally frightening, because he was unconscious briefly. That was not fun.
So what are we at, 4?
The rule is you actually need to be okay physically. Like, you can't... Like,
That was
Leroy
bad,
could
though.
have died in
That was
that,
bad.
and that was not cool. That's part of the reason he won't do the show anymore, is
Really?
that
I didn't
exact
know that.
incident.
Yeah, I mean, we see some wicked falls.
Of course,
Right?
yes.
We saw the one with... that's what led us into this conversation, right? Was James's fall this episode, but...
Yeah,
it's
not tough scene.
brutal. The other one that was really bad is you could pick one from the first Battle of the X's, which was probably the most unsafe
Where they have the
fall in the
honey?
history of the show that they did repeatedly.
Oh, what about
Yeah, they basically did like a catapult
what
during the
about-
trivia
that one's bad.
mission.
What about on the first episode though?
That was bad. Like,
So the first
everybody
episode when
was
they have the
hurting after
honey that they like lather themselves and then walk across the beam. Nate, of course. Fat Nate.
What was his name?
Nate.
The
Yeah.
Nate, Fat Nate. Oh my gosh, that
And
was
then
so freaking hilarious.
Because that's not one fall. It's just the repeated like 2 steps fall, 2 steps fall, 3 steps fall, like that. Oh my god.
And he fell like
Yeah,
a bowling ball each time. Like,
People
he was
forget
so
about
round,
him
it was
because
just like
when you talk about worst male competitors ever, like there's just not a significant track record, but he completely botched both events he was involved in. He does like the thing and like
All right.
Mandy's winning very Mandy and West, neither of them have broken a sweat yet, and he falls over on the pylon.
Yep. Yeah, he was bad. He was really, really bad. So,
What else do we want to talk about from this episode?
I don't know. I think we touched on a lot of it already.
What did we think about the elimination?
what did you guys think of the
Yeah,
elimination?
we haven't talked about
Yeah,
I wasn't.
that's what I want to talk about.
I didn't
wasn't
like
a
it.
big
What a
fan,
great
to be honest.
elimination.
I like spin bikes.
Really?
Like, come on. We're just sitting there watching him pedal.
I just don't think it works.
I was completely fine with it.
I just don't think it works well from a viewer's perspective.
We're just watching him pedal.
I get that this may be good competitively. This tests a couple of different skill sets, right? Endurance and then memory. But I don't know. It was.
That's my thing. Is like you said, Tiffany was doing so poorly. I mean, you just watched her on the revolution she made on the pedal, and that's to determine what she was doing. Like it was not like there was much tactics involved.
Yeah, I thought it was fine. I thought it was a very legit test in that, can you endure this? Can you memorize it? Because the memorization thing, it was like maybe up there for 10 seconds. And if you didn't get it right, you had to go do it all over again. And so I appreciated that. Cashel was working his ass off, but it was clear Tiffany, now that I know in hindsight she had a hurt ankle, I can understand why she did as poorly as she did. But you could tell from her body language, even though they got the first part right, it was obvious that for the long haul, she wasn't going to make it to the end of that elimination as the winner. And so I appreciate it because I hate eliminations where there is an obvious disadvantage for someone. Like that's just part of the nature of the beast with the challenge. But I really do hate it when they have like reverse tug of war and one person weighs 130 pounds and the other one weighs 240.
Yeah. No, I'm with
it's
you.
Just so unfair. And so, like, at least this is a fair test. Like, hey, you might not have the best cardio, but maybe you memorize this better. Or maybe your cardio is awesome, so it gives you an extra round like Amazing Race got because they missed the first round. So I'm cool with stuff like this. It might, like Devin said, it might not be very interesting as a viewer. I just really want an elimination to either be so spectacular as a viewer or be a fair fight. And when they do the unfair eliminations, that's when I start to have problems.
Really, the more I think about it, if you were to pick one skill set that you weren't good in compared to the others when it comes to the show, strength might be the number one
least
thing
necessary
that you would pick to not be good at.
Well, what counts as a skill?
The least necessary.
How general are you being? Is eating a skill or no? Is swimming a skill?
No. Yeah, I mean, so what I was thinking about was...
Like, we're just breaking down, like, strength,
memory,
agility...
I was thinking, Rob, I was thinking memory,
cardio,
strength, endurance, and agility, right? As far as physical
I would
skills
probably
go.
agree with that. Obviously, you're very vulnerable to eliminations, but that honestly is, like, the only point. But there's not many missions that are super strength-based. In finals, there's strength elements, but usually that's combined with something else.
Not really.
Well, it's a lot of like you have to
carry. There's not a lot of strength.
Like, carry this object a certain amount of length, which involves strength and endurance.
Correct. And then when it comes to eliminations, there are certain eliminations that are just strength based, but those are far in the minority. I feel like over the course of the season, a lot of those are the most memorable ones, right? Even if we look at the last few seasons that we've had, and I think we've talked about this before, and we've gone back and looked. What percentage of the eliminations do you feel like are purely strength-based?
Like
20%?
Yeah, it depends on. It really depends on the season.
I would even say less than that. I would say
like a season like Free Agents, where they had a lot of eliminations that were very.
I know, that's why I'm saying the last few seasons. Like, I mean, I don't know how much.
The only one that I can think of is like the Spinny Madoo with. Mark.
Well, I mean, but you also have pole wrestle. Like that's very strength based. Yeah, but you.
It is, but it isn't either. That's really more about.
I think both, bro.
The big guy.
I mean, strength is a huge component of it.
We've certainly seen points.
Wrong. But a lot of that is you can win pole wrestle if you're not the stronger person, if you can get the right leverage.
When have we seen that? Because I don't think.
How would you compare Darrell and Zach?
I think that's one. I think that's one of those situations where the big guy beats the little guy. Yeah, I mean that's true, right? I mean Zach is definitely probably.
That's the one I was thinking was Darrell and Zach. Like Darrell just like endured and out leveraged him, and Zach is clearly bigger and stronger than Darrell.
I don't know. I would be curious to know how much stronger
I think
Zach actually is.
Darrell's pretty freaking. Yeah.
I know that's what I mean.
Like maybe Zach just has
when it comes to
muscles.
When it comes to function,
if you just
when it comes to functional
just give the
strength,
two of
right?
them
Like, I wonder how much
if you give two of them dumbbells and you see figure out who lifts more. I don't know that it's that different.
Yeah, I would agree. Like, Jarrell's, like, pretty jacked.
That's fair. And I think a lot of that, too, is just Jarrell, because he's a boxer, he had footwork and finesse with his hands, whereas Zach, I think, is just brute strength. I think that was the big difference there.
I thought there was a good comment by Tyson this episode, where he talked about, he asked himself, are Cashel's muscles model muscles, or are they practical muscles?
Yeah, that was a good one, too.
Yes.
He said in preparation for this
Who is
season
winning?
that Tyson's main thing was he just had a jiu-jitsu trainer tell him, like, how do I beat people bigger than me? And he trained with him, like, 2 or 3 times a week.
That's interesting.
Yeah, which is probably a good move because that teaches a variety of skills that you probably need. I think jiu-jitsu is probably the one you want to go with, too, because you do get a lot of, like, wrestling, grappling stuff that comes in handy. You're not punching people that often.
And I mean, he's addressing his weakness, right?
Just in terms of
I think
strength.
Everything else, right? Everything else, he's better than everyone else at. As good, if not
I think
better.
there's some of the people that are still question marks, but to this point, he certainly has been.
So did we have any surprising... So now that we've seen these people for 2 weeks, is there anyone in this episode who really jumped out at us that we learned more about that we didn't really have an impression of coming out of week 1?
I think we saw Justine perform pretty well. That's one thing I would say is that I knew about her soccer background, but
I don't think we really started.
Well, the one thing I would say,
it seemed like she put the puzzle together.
No, but she was also able to get onto able to get onto whatever you'd call that object and then maneuver around it and grab the signs, which a lot of them weren't able to do.
I mean, we saw other women do that too.
Well, we saw women do that that we
would have
thought were good already. We saw like Sarah, Tasha, and Angela do that. We know about their athletic background. With the Love Island woman, I assume most. I don't mean to be judgmental. I assume most of them are going to be bad unless proven otherwise, and she proved otherwise to some degree.
I don't really know how many times we saw her do it. To be honest,
it was at least twice.
What they had. Okay, yeah. I mean, that didn't really stand out to me. For the
one thing that
they're on.
One thing I want to comment to on that Tyson situation, I was going through before my phone overheated and I got removed from the show. So with Tyson, would you have been that transparent about blindsiding somebody this early?
No.
I mean, so that's the question.
I don't think it was a bad move. I don't think it was a bad move because everybody didn't want.
Well,
her
my
there,
point
so
though is that so Justine is no longer going to be his partner, and I don't know how wily she's thinking, but you've just seen that he had a conversation with somebody, said they were safe, and then they weren't. You just saw him do that. You were part of that maneuver. Going forward now, doesn't that have to ring some alarm bells whenever he's talking to you about anything?
Well, based off of the edit, it seems like Justine is completely on Tyson's side now, right? And I think that speaks to how well Tyson is playing. At the start of the episode, Justine was like, Tyson just put in my best friend, or one of my really good friends who I was on a season with, sent her home. I don't know how I feel about being partners with Tyson. To the end of the episode, she's calling Tyson a mentor to her, right? That's literally what happened in one cycle. That's how good he's playing right now. And as far as it being a blind side, I think it was a blind side from the perspective of Tiffany, but from the rest of the people in the house, I'm not sure how much of a blind side it was.
You just saw him lie to somebody and then throw them in. Like, how can you say now whenever he's talking to you about anything, he's not going to do the same thing to you?
Dude, all these people do is lie to each other. You think this is for Survivor and Big Brother? This is the first time they've ever had anyone lie to them, and you don't know how much. I mean, the Love Island people don't even matter, dude. Like they're literally they're kind of like following along. I don't think
they could win something.
They're cannon fodder.
Dude, they're just. They're pawns in this, dude. And I think Justine is completely on Tyson's side going forward.
We'll see what happens. I don't think he'd have much reason to try to get rid of her. But I was just saying that for me, if I was playing one of these games, it's one of the reasons why I would never trust Devin if we were ever on one of these shows together. Is just once someone exposes themselves as being willing to turn on their allies, their alliance with me is going to be very much hindered because of that.
Yeah, I would agree.
See, that's the difference between you and me there, Rob, because if you make a game move that I don't know about and we're aligned and it benefits me too, I'm not going to be upset about it, because even if we're quote unquote confidants in the game, if you make a move that benefits both of us and you kept it very quiet just because, not because you didn't trust me, but maybe there was place to have that conversation
how do you know why
where
they
it might
do
not
that?
be
And then
overheard.
you wouldn't then think there's a possibility they'll do the same thing to you later on?
Well, I would think there's the possibility, but Devin would probably have the same thought about me, because he knows that at the end of the day, even though we're quote unquote aligned, at the end of the day, like, I'm gonna do what's best for me because I got a wife and kids. So like, those are the types of things you have to weigh. Like you can work together and get so far, but at some point, nut cutting time happens, and so I expect it to maybe happen, and it's better for me to play a better game to outwit him first.
This is what it comes down to, and this was. I used to think about this quote more than I do now, but Yao Man on Survivor Fiji had a very famous quote where he said, "Trust is when what's in my best interest also happens to be in someone else's best interest. When those two are the same." That's not exactly what he said, but that's the extent of what it is, right? And so someone can backstab, can blindside you with your decision if you're aligned with them, and you can trust them later on if what you two are trying to do later happens to be in both of your best
But
interests,
what someone's trying to do is not always
That's
apparent,
what it comes down to.
There you go.
Like with a lot of these alliances we've seen, what someone is trying to do is not always apparent. Like with a lot of what these...
That's the skill, right? That's the skill in this, is trying to figure out what's actually in their best interest. That's what's hard about it. It's not easy.
My thing is, like, with a lot of these alliances on the challenge, on these other shows, not all of them are entirely self-motivated. There are a lot of alliances where people, like, we just look at, like, the Lavender Ladies, for example, on the challenge, where there is a very much a group mindset of our main objective is to get all of us to the end. What's benefiting one single member of our group is not what we're going to do most of the time. We're going to actually function as a group for all intents and purposes. We've seen that with some of the JEK alliances, for example, on the show. They were splitting the money anyway, so a lot of times they would act as just sort of one, blob of people. But once you expose that you're willing to cut within your group for your own self-interest, that even if you portray that illusion of what the group mindset is, that's not going to hold as much water to me.
I think it's just situational. Like, going back to your analogy of like you and him, or you, or me and Devin, or whomever, like at some point Devin would have to make a decision of, like, let's say he had to pick between you and I in a situation on a show. He would probably...
Are we talking about me, or are we talking about other Devin?
You.
Okay.
I'm talking about you. You, Devin. That's who he's been talking about this whole time.
I had no idea.
Like, not the whole time, but keep going.
Yeah, that's who he was talking about. All right. So he would probably pick me over you, not because he likes me better than you, but because I'm older, fatter, and slower.
What game are we playing?
Any of them, really, except Survivor.
I mean,
if we're playing the challenge, he's going to pick me over you at some point, so it would behoove you to work with us until it was no longer in your best interest. My point of what I'm referencing there
is that...
And that's what Devin is saying.
I think they're going to matter within the game just because... Just having those extra buys on your side, I think would be useful if you're Survivor Big Brother, and it does come to that throwdown. Like, if you know that's what the showdown's going to be, you should probably start taking a couple more shots to the other side rather than just getting rid of the cannon fodder Love Island people. So having their wills in on your side is a good idea. But when you expose yourself as a bad ally to somebody, like, that should make their credibility in working with you going forward much more reduced.
Well, the only thing that I think really will help Tyson here is at this point the Love Island numbers are
How many
down
of them were there
by
in total?
3.
We need to get those numbers. We need to have like a running chart of that.
So there were...
Yeah. All right, so let me assume that last week they got rid of 2 Love Island
correct.
people,
There's
right?
been 3 that have gone so
Correct.
far. Okay, so they've got 3 of them down. So Tyson,
only 4 left.
by quote unquote mentoring and her making the comment she did about Tyson, it would behoove Tyson at this point, because she can go back to the Love Island people and say, hey, Tyson showed me this, and this, and this is what I think, and here's what he's doing. Tyson can then manipulate Love Island to start taking out Big Brother. And then you can go back and take out Love Island because you're really not threatened by them in the first place. So, like, I think that Tyson is going to kind of keep Angela close because he realizes she's good and she could potentially help him because he could get paired with her in a final. You don't know yet. So you kind of want to weed out some of the weaker Big Brother people and then go back to weeding out the weaker Love Island people, because I think that's what Tyson's doing, is he understands and he's watched enough of the challenge that having a bad partner in a final, you'll lose more than likely. So it allows Tyson to really manipulate everything going on if Justine is on his side.
There's no way that... Well, before I forget, we did count up the numbers, Rob, between Big Brother and Survivor. And before this cycle, there were 9 Big Brother players and there were 8 Survivor players. And I brought up with Trace that one of the reasons that Big Brother may have been okay with this about losing Tiffany was because it still brought the numbers down to even, right? They didn't completely lose their advantage. And I wonder if that was... When Tyson had the conversation with Tiffany, we didn't really talk about this yet. When Tyson had the conversation with Tiffany about who was going to go home, and we lose Rob again, when Tyson had that conversation with Tiffany, it was interesting, Trace, that she pretty much conceded that it was going to be a Big Brother team that was going home. She didn't really even dispute that. Mm-hmm. And it was, at that point, just which Big Brother pairing was going to go in. Because from her perspective, she thought it was going to be Xavier or Azza or Enzo and Alyssa, right? We haven't really talked about the dynamic between Xavier and Alyssa yet, which I think is really interesting. Multiple times this season, we've heard from her about how Xavier was her best friend on the show, and for 65 days on the show, Xavier lied to her, and that he really... it honestly kind of makes me want to go and watch that season. I mean, it sounds like...
It seems like the season with the cookout was pretty interesting, for sure. And I've never seen Big Brother since season 1. So if I was ever going to go back and watch a season, at the moment, that would be the one I'd go see.
Yeah, I would be interested to know from people that watch Big Brother if that was actually... if they considered that a good season or not.
Yeah, I'm sure we could ask Ben. He could tell us.
All right, what else do we have?
The only other thing I want to make a comment on is, please, for the love of God, do not spend that much time on the friggin' algorithm at the very start of every episode. That was, I think, what killed the momentum for me, because I watched it live, and I was way more critical of it live than I was on the rewatch. On the rewatch, I already knew how angry I was going to be about how long the mission was and the algorithm, but the rest of the episode was very, very, very good. But they have got to tighten up the mission, and they've got to tighten up that algorithm piece, because that algorithm piece seemed to take forever at the beginning of the episode.
It'll get better as they have fewer and fewer people.
As they dwindle the numbers. But
yeah, but I know what you mean. I thought the same thing. It just takes a while. I mean, how long of airtime do you think it actually took? 5 minutes?
It probably took 4, and that was way too long. They could have done that in a minute by saying, okay, show the video of the most enticing pairs, taking Tyson and what we thought was the worst female from worst female from week 1. Turns out maybe she's really not the worst female. So that was an interesting thing to show, and then maybe show the 2 Amazing Race people getting hooked together, because that's just bad juju for them and the politics of the situation. But then the rest of it, they could have just flashed a graphic up on the screen for 5 seconds and said, here's the rest of our pairs. All right, everybody, see you next time. They could have done it in a minute instead of spending 4 minutes, and they could have given us more political content.
Do you think the final will be formatted in a similar structure to the way that All Stars 3 was, in the sense that there will be...
Yes, I think the finals will be very similar.
Pairs that they cycle throughout the course of the final. I mean, they kind of have to. Because if we operate under the assumption that they do want to have pairs in a final, which I think is a fair assumption to have... It's
helpful.
I don't know. I think... I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. I think you can... I think you can still have the final and not have them be in pairs and still have it be good. But if we operate under the assumption that they want to do that, and that there will be an individual winner from the men and the women, it seems like that's bound to happen. I mean, if we, dude, and it's obvious that Tyson is going to get screwed over at some point, just based off of his comments.
Yeah.
How comical would it be? Yeah, I mean, it would be sad. I guess it wouldn't be comical if he gets screwed over by some small head start that he gets, or I mean, I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see what happens for his downfall if we don't think he's going to win.
Yeah, I mean, he's the main star of the show at the moment. He's the one that's getting the most screen time, and it just feels like they're setting him up to get screwed somehow. Now, I don't know how they're going to do it, whether it's an elimination or something that happens in the final, but I just feel like this isn't going to turn out well for him. Ironically enough, if we were doing power rankings right now, I think the person on the male side that's going to win is Danny, just based on what we've seen so far these first couple weeks, because they have him commenting on stuff he's not even involved in.
I mean, it's his...
So because he's not involved in anything, they keep finding a reason to put him
wife.
on TV.
I mean, I feel like he's always talking about his wife, Kiki. I mean, I feel like we know more about Kiki than we know about Danny if you just watched this show.
Yeah. So, I mean, but he's getting screen time that means nothing, but they're making an effort to keep putting him on screen, so they want him to be visible. And then I also think James is going to go far, but it also could have just been the circumstances of the first 2 episodes where he pulled off the political stuff last week, and then this week he was in elimination, so that could completely change next week.
Right, so if we didn't... Let's go through people real quick. If we didn't know about Tyson's comments coming into this, he would be number 1, right? By far. It wouldn't even be close.
Yeah, it wouldn't even be close, but the way he's acted on social media, it makes me go, I don't think so.
Ben...
Which was funny. He liked my tweet the other night while we were watching the episode, which was really funny because I posted something like, man, Tyson looks really upset about this algorithm thing. Can't really blame him. And like within 5 minutes, he had liked it. I was like, yeah, I could tell something happens with some chicanery in the rules here somewhere that he's not real thrilled about. They probably screwed him.
I'm probably not.
He's been borderline invisible.
Danny... You said that, and my immediate pushback was, but honestly, looking at the rest of the people, I don't know who else I would have as high as him, right? So Danny, I could see it. David Alexander pretty much hasn't even been on the show. Derek has had random comments that he's made here and there. Dom, I can't see it. Enzo, can't see it. James, can't see it. Kyland, maybe. We'll see what happens. Leo, can't see it. Cinco definitely cannot see it. Tyson, we've talked about Tyson. Xavier can definitely see it. So at this point, it's Tyson, Xavier, Kyland, and Danny. Right? Those 4. Mm-hmm. We really haven't seen that much from Xavier. We saw his conversation with Alyssa this episode, and they had the brief flashback between him and Tyson. Mm-hmm. Other than that, through the first 2 episodes, he really hasn't been that present. So, yeah, I mean, I think I would probably have Danny second too, right? Or number 1, right? Knowing what we know about Tyson. For the women, who would we have number 1?
I think you could make a case. I think you could make a case for 4, but number 1 with a bullet is Sarah, especially the way she was edited this second episode. They are setting her up for the heroine edit, like for sure. Like that is where it's going. So. Whether she wins or just barely misses, I don't know. But like right now, Sarah's number 1. Number 2 would probably be Angela, just based on the way they've edited her so far as well. And then
Desi,
3,
for sure. I think.
Yeah.
Because she has got...
Though I don't necessarily... I think there are other people that will make the final, but of those that are being edited to look like a winner, those would be the ones.
Because she's gotten a lot of visibility, and we've gotten a lot of narrative around her... about her performance, right? We had the conversation, or we had the comment from Cache this episode about Desi's biceps, right? We know that physically she's strong. I think she's definitely one of the women that's in contention to win this season, right? Because let's do what we did for the women real quick that we did for the men. Tasha, can't see it. Shan, maybe.
No,
why?
I don't see that happening. Especially based off what happened in episode 2 here. They had the little thing where it was like, hey, if you want the rest of the house to know something, tell Shan. And they did the little thing. It was kind of cute that they put her like in a fake newscaster thing while she was doing her confessional. That was pretty clever. The way that came across to me is you shouldn't trust her and no one else will.
I agree.
So I think she's going to get... she's not winning.
I wouldn't rule her out completely because of that, just because of how strong I think she could be overall. But...
I just don't think she could beat Sarah head-to-head.
Because you have to remember, I really want to know who's editing these things and who's kind of like driving the course of how this is edited. If it's the same challenge, I don't know. Like, I mean, the challenge has I think has no rhyme or reason with the way that they've edited, right? Because Rob has always talked about, they give them their winners like a higher level of visibility. Obviously, that's complete horseshit because Casey won last season and she was barely on the show. You know,
But also, Casey gave them nothing.
We don't know.
Other than her stupid date with Nany, what else
So that's what I mean, right?
Her?
If they're trying to give their winners higher level of visibility, then, like, wouldn't they still try and, like, pigeonhole her in there somehow? I don't know.
Yeah. But you could also say for All-Stars 3, Wes was the most visible person throughout the entire season. We've
talked about this. No way. He was really visible at the start and at the end. But, like, in the middle, like, he was, like, pretty much, like flattened out.
But he was always hovering there, and they were still showing his confessionals. Like, he was still highly visible. It's just the narrative of what was happening in the house shifted a little bit, because he started playing a little more under the radar in the mid.
No, I don't know. Season. Like, I think Rob would probably agree with me on that if he was here. Like, there were definitely...
His phone
There were definitely points where I thought that they could have included, and I thought about this in the last few days, where they could have included Wes, and they didn't for some reason. Because he was really present at the start of the season, and then there were multiple episodes where he was just barely in it, and like maybe had like one or two confessionals. So I thought that was a much more. It was kind of like a lopsided edit. It was like a barbell edit, right? Like really, really present at the beginning.
But see, the other piece of that, my other argument against that though, is some of those episodes where he wasn't visible, John A was. And she was highly involved, so they decided to focus on those episodes around the other winner. See, that's another thing that the challenge has different from some of these other reality shows is on Survivor, one winner. Always. So you really only have to craft a narrative around one person. Big Brother, same thing. Amazing Race, it's a team. Whereas for the challenge, and especially in this case All-Stars 3, you have one male and one female, and if their storylines don't intersect, you almost have to do a bunch of highlights of this person and then a bunch of highlights of this person, but then also show the rest of the narrative of what's happening in the house. So that's why I don't put as much stock into your argument there, because it felt like when Wes wasn't as visible, they were really focusing on John A. And she was very involved in the eliminations and everything else.
I would have to go back and look at it. Like I don't think there would probably be a perfect layover with that, right? Where every episode that...
No, probably not an exact match. There was probably an episode where neither of them were involved. You know, I mean, like...
Because I didn't think, like, Janae definitely had some visibility, but it's not like... I think they were, like, shoving her in your face all the time. Or a lot of the time, like...
Well, they didn't have to because she was naturally involved with what was going on. Like, she had to go into elimination twice.
So if she's naturally involved with...
She volunteered to go in the
If she's naturally involved with what's going on, like, how can you say that they're, like, editing her to, like, be a winner then?
Well, they made emphasis on it. That's my point. Like, they spent more time in the episode on, like, there was a couple pointless conversations, in my opinion, that could have been used for other content, but it matched the overall narrative, which is Wes and John A. win the season.
I don't...
So because the events were unfolding naturally, really the big talk of those middle episodes was the treehouse falling apart.
Like, I think 2 weeks before the season ended, I don't think we had Wes winning, right? And that was like right before the final, we didn't have Wes winning. You know, so I don't know how we can...
Yeah, we had Brad and then Wes, I think. Like we started with Wes, or we've kind of gone... We went back and forth between Brad and Wes every week until
we literally had a conversation about how we didn't think Wes was going to win because his visibility went down and the way that they were like depicting him in the house, that he wasn't getting what he wanted, right? I don't know. I really don't think that there's much of a rhyme or reason, right? I think if we went back and like looked at our predictions, like they probably wouldn't be very good. When we can do that now. I mean, at this point, we probably have
I mean, we keep the Google Sheets, so we can
we
watch
have
it.
about
we can go back and check.
I don't,
We have several years now of this. I think we started doing power rankings, during Double Agents or Final Reckoning? Final Reckoning was the first time we did power rankings of a live season, so we could literally track from
the
Total Madness on for every season and
in
see how
episode
well we did.
8, none of us had Wes. No.
Really?
None of us had Wes. In episode 7, none of us had Wes. In episode 6, none of us had Wes. I don't know when...
Wow.
I don't know if any of us had Wes number 1 until the last week of the season, or in episode 9 when all of us had Wes is number 1.
Yeah, when we got halfway through the final, we all were like, yeah, Wes is winning this. This is what's going to happen now.
Yeah.
So I think the only one that was very consistent was, I felt after the very first episode, Bananas was winning Total Madness. Like, it was just screaming that this is the Johnny Bananas comeback. And yeah, that was the narrative of the season, was Johnny.
And then for Spy Sides and Allies, this is
Double Agents, I think we had CT called pretty early too, but the female was like a giant question mark most of the way through.
Yeah, I mean, for Spy Sides and Allies, like, he's...
Because Amber B did not get a great edit on Double Agents. Like, she was involved in stuff, but it always seemed to be negative against her instead of positive.
For Spy Sides and Allies, I had Casey quite a bit. I don't know how often I ever had her as number 1, but that's because, like, I don't think I had her number 1.
I
think that's because the way that they edit this is completely bogus, or not bogus, but I just don't think that they necessarily go out of their way to do anything special with their winners, right? I think they just take whatever content they have and try and craft that in a specific way to make an enjoyable show, which is fine, right? But all the people who come in and try and say that there's some, like, predictive quality, like overly predictive quality, I don't know. All right.
Yeah.
Closing thoughts.
I actually, just to close it, let me close the loop on that conversation where we close the thoughts on Challenge USA. I will say that I felt like All Stars 3, in hindsight, had the most telegraphing we've had in a while of the winners, because the way they started the season with Wes, and of course how they ended with Wes, and in the middle, I think we got lost in translation because he wasn't in there as much. But I think my thoughts on John A being more focused on, the more I'm thinking through the events of the season, we had Beth come on and we had the whole affair drama, the MJ and John A stuff about MJ going home. Like, everything was really focused around John A in those middle episodes. Like, the more I'm thinking about it, like, the beginning of the season was all about Wes, the middle of the season was all about John A, and then the end of the season was pretty balanced because Wes's appearance spike went way back up. So I think from a editing telegraphing, when you look at the season as a whole and not just week by week, and maybe that's really what we should start thinking through with these power rankings is, you know, we kind of track it episode by episode on how we're feeling. I think I need to take a step back and think about the overall arc of the season, because in hindsight, All Stars 3 was telegraphed very early what was happening.
All right.
So
if you want to get your email question in for the email show that we're going to do on Sunday, message us on Discord, message us on Patreon, email us at thechallengechronicles@gmail.com. If you want to actually listen to that episode and our response to the question that you send in, become a patron, go to the Challenge Chronicles, patreon.com/the Challenge Chronicles and subscribe for $4 per month. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you again soon. Bye.